Hello, my name is Matthew, and I just finished part three of Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. And if you're reading along or if you've read it, the one thing that becomes so apparent at this point is how much of a page turner this novel is. It's an incredibly fast read from the beginning, but the more involved you get into the story, uh, it just seems like the quicker the story goes along, and it's a very hard book to put down. And part three is a bit strange. At the beginning, part one, it's a third person. The novel's a third person narrative. We just have these characters in front of us, but part one really feels like we're just in Raskolnikov's mind. It's nearly a first person narrative. It's as if he's wearing a camera on his head, and we're just following him around and spending so much time with him and with his emotions and psychological state. Part one feels um, isolated. It seems like he's all by himself in this um, desolate landscape. There's some figures that come in and out, but it's just all about Raskolnikov. And part two, after the crime has been committed, characters start appearing, and the novel becomes extremely populated by a wide variety of characters with different relationships. We have the landlord and the servant, and the family relationships, and Raskolnikov has a friend and a doctor, and there's the man that wants to court or be engaged to his sister, and other characters, the friend that he met, that the guy that he met that got trampled by the horses, and all of these characters. All of a sudden, it's this extremely full, populated story. Where at once it was just Raskolnikov. Part three does something that hasn't happened up until this point. We leave Raskolnikov entirely. He's asleep in bed, and we follow another story. The camera turns away from Raskolnikov, and we follow um, uh, his friend, his extremely drunken friend, taking his Raskolnikov's sister and mother um, down the street to the other apartment that they're going to be staying at. And that departure is so striking in the story. It's the first time that we're not just ever present with Raskolnikov. He's just sick in bed. It begins with this extremely tense, high emotional, um, highly emotional situation. Raskolnikov has been surprised by his family. His mother and sister have surprised him in his apartment, and Raskolnikov had come home um, exhausted, delirious, um, maybe at the point of madness or completely mad, um, ill nourished, and off his rocker. At this point, he's a character that really is um, acting insane. And he comes home with his drunken friend. I can never pronounce his name. Who is just out of his mind drunk, barely um, standing, barely um, able to think clearly, and he's in this hyper excited state where he can still be articulate and have plans, but it's apparent that he's just deliriously drunk, and the mother and sister are also just at their wits end with what they've encountered. They've just come into the city. They were excited to see their son. He passes out at the sight of him. He's with this man that's just completely drunk, trying to explain the situation. He's going to get them out of the apartment. He's going to have a doctor come over. He's having all of these plans. The sister and mother, very rightfully so, don't trust this person. They're also, in some ways, stuck with him. They are in a situation where they need to rely on someone. They find that they can't stay in the apartment. There's no other rooms in that apartment complex. They need to leave the street at night. It's a city that's unfamiliar to them. The apartment complex that they're staying at is a place that doesn't have a very good reputation. And so the characters that we have at this point are all having different types of madness or delirium. It's a story full of insanity, just swirling around, showing all the different ways that you can be at your wit's end. We have the drunken friend taking the wife and sister down the street, and he's holding their hands, and he's getting on his knees and pleading with them, and grabbing them by their ankles and their legs, and causing a scene, and making a commotion. It's pathetic and outrageous, and there's more development in romances, and almost like a demented love story. And as all this is going on, we have all these personalities having all this kind of different madness, and the focus of the story is now on this domestic drama. What's going on with the wife and sister, the mother and the mother and sister, the mother being worried for her son, the son being unhappy that his sister is going to be marrying this man that he doesn't approve of. He's thrown him out of the house. He has had his pride hurt, this man that wants to marry the sister, so he wants to have an invitation, but Raskolnikov isn't invited, and Raskolnikov wants to be invited, and the family's turning to him for moral guidance or moral approval. The whole family of the mother and sister and the friend and the doctor are extremely leery of Raskolnikov. They're suspicious or afraid of him. They see that he'll have a sarcastic smile or this sneering smirk. They kind of talk about, is he insane? Has he gone insane? Is he mad? All the while, we know the story behind all of this. This is a man that has recently, just very recently, murdered two people, and is now just having this domestic drama piling on top of him. All of a sudden, he's staring at his mother. His sister is in his room. The man that wants to marry his sister is in the room. All of these things that comparatively show that the domestic drama to be rather trivial compared to a man murdering somebody, murdering two people. We have there's dream-like images that have been on my mind, recurring things that the way that Dostoevsky does it builds this nightmarish imagery. So earlier in the book, we had Raskolnikov having this dream of a horse being beaten to death. And then later on, while he's awake, there's a horse that tramples and kills a man. So we have a dream where a horse is tortured and murdered, and then in the waking life, the horse tramples and kills the man. Um, Raskolnikov has this dream re-envisioning the night of the murder, sort of like a funhouse image of version of the night of the murder, and he hears a fly pensively tap the window pane, and he wakes up in a sweat, trying to figure out was he awake or asleep, and later on he hears a fly tap, the same imagery, a fly tap on a window pane pensively. And there's like this blur. Raskolnikov himself has these doubts of the veracity of his waking life, and the imaginary world of his dream life. They're kind of blurring together. We have one of the best, most incredibly tense chapters in part 3, and it's Porphyry. Is that how you say his name? But it's going to be the police investigator, this person that's interrogating Raskolnikov, and they finally meet because there's been these kind of suspicions and swirlings and just little things of people thinking that Raskolnikov's not quite right. No real connection with the murder, but there has been these suspicious things. He went back to the house. Anytime the murder is brought up, there's a great moment when Raskolnikov is arguing with his sister, and they're just hammering back and forth, just this sibling, heated personal argument about whether or not the suitor for the sister is a good man. Is he worthy? Should she be marrying him? Is she marrying him for the right reasons? And the whole family's there. At a certain point, the sister goes, "It's not like Raskolnikov, what are you so upset about? It's not like I murdered anybody." And he just goes white. But Porphyry has this incredible chapter interrogating and having this conversation with Raskolnikov, just sizing him up. Porphyry knowing a lot of information, and Raskolnikov being confronted with, increasingly as the story goes on, but at this point, confronted with the idea that maybe he's not getting away scot-free. Maybe something went wrong. Maybe there was a witness. Maybe there's extra evidence. But he's there under the pretense he's meeting this person to see if he can collect the items that were in the pawn shop. And it's mentioned that he's the only person that came forward asking if they can have their items back. He said that they're personal heirlooms. And there's this philosophical conversation between the two of them. It really reminded me of the conversations between Ivan and Alyosha and the Karamazov brothers, by the philosophical depth and the way that the narrative can kind of be put on hold to have a philosophical discussion, but the philosophical discussion is still moving the plot forward. It's really brilliant. But Porphyry, if that's how you say it, brings up the fact that Raskolnikov has written a published paper in a magazine, expounding on the philosophical idea of what is permissible, and has this theory of ordinary and extraordinary men. And there's even that refrain that we also get in the Karamazov brothers with, as he talks or as the paper is explained to us, these extraordinary men, all things are permissible. And Porfiry brings it up and kind of blindsides Raskolnikov, wondering how he had even read it, where was it published. He didn't even know that it was published, or was confused upon the publication. And it's this paper, much like how Ivan had a paper. There's a lot of similarities. Maybe we should. I'd be interested to hear what people think about some of the similarities between the two books. But there's a lot of logic mirrored between this paper and the idea that maybe it's okay for some people to be above the law, to cause bloodshed, cause carnage. Alexander the Great is brought up, and Napoleon and Caesar, these great men that can just kill freely for the greater good. And this is something that Raskolnikov has brought up in his mind anyway, what he thinks, and all the good deeds that he can do. And Raskolnikov does say that Porfiry is simplifying and exaggerating the points that are brought up in his paper, but also can't flat out deny them. And he even says, well, it's true. There are people that are above the law. There are people that are larger than life. These things have happened. It's all around us. And Porfiry goes, but do you think you're one of these people? Are you one of these extraordinary men? And in the conversation, it seems that Porfiry knows much more than we think that he knows at this point. And Raskolnikov lets it out that he was in the same apartment complex near the time of the murder. He was obviously pawning things with the murder victim, the wife of the civil servant. And Porfiry asks him this detail and says, now when you were in the apartment, was there a door open, and were there painters working in that apartment? Did you see those painters? And now I'm going to forget which way it went, but I think Raskolnikov said, no, nobody was there. In fact, there was a mover. There were these movers that had to squeeze by because there was a sofa. And eventually they leave. They both go off. But Raskolnikov and his friend are talking, and Raskolnikov is talking about how clever Porfiry is. He's extremely clever, but Raskolnikov is clever, and Porfiry knows that Raskolnikov is clever, and he knows that he knows is clever, so he has to be even more clever, but he knows that he has to be even more clever than that. And so his answer was what he thought was the right thing to get him out of implicating him of being there at the wrong time. And so this is the cat and mouse game. We have this tension. It's so interesting to think about whose side are we still on. Do we still do we want Raskolnikov to be caught? Is it going to be important how he is caught? Do we want him to get away? Philosophically, is he actually innocent? Is he guilty? Is the repercussions of feeling bad on your own, the self-inflicted punishment, is that enough? All of these really interesting questions come up, and all of this dreaminess towards the end turns into nightmarishness. It just starts into this swirl of insanity. More and more mysterious strangers are showing up. There's a man in a robe and shadows seeing Raskolnikov come out of his apartment. He follows him. The man goes, "You're a murderer. You're a murderer." That's in his mind. Um, Part 4 ends with Raskolnikov waking up, and across from him in his apartment is another mysterious stranger. It's Arkady, who is going to have a past with the rest of the family. But it ends again where we have a new arrival, somebody there. There's more and more people kind of piling into this story. So those are some of my thoughts on part 3. It was a departure from the rest of the story so far because we just get a lot more background. We follow a lot more characters. We get a greater understanding of the relationships between these characters. I am purposefully omitting the names for a few reasons. I get confused myself, and I don't want to be butchering the pronunciation, but I just think through context it makes sense of who all the people are, especially when you're reading the book. So, very tense, nightmarish. Those are my thoughts on part 3 and the first half of the book. It's thrilling, it's a page turner, and if you've been reading along, if you've read the book, let me know what you think, what your thoughts on the book or anything that I had to say. So please leave a comment if you would like, and thank you for watching, and take care.